Hi, we'd like to welcome you to tonight's episode of Access Ann Arbor, and the title of our show is Should You Volunteer with Hoarders? My name is Diane Fensky. I'm going to act as the host tonight, and I am a member of the Hoarding Task Force of Washtenaw County. And I have two guests with me. This is Patrice Legrand, who is also a member of the Hoarding Task Force and is the volunteer coordinator of the Clutter Assistance Program, and one of our volunteers, Bridgets Spencer. And we are going to tell you a little bit in an introductory manner about the Hoarding Task Force of Washtenaw County, because we can imagine to ourselves you're sitting in your home saying, we didn't know we had a task force for hoarders in Washtenaw County, and why do we have this? So we'd like to give you a little background information before we talk about our volunteer program and why you should consider volunteering with the Hoarding Task Force program. The Hoarding Task Force had its beginnings in around 2005 when one of our colleagues, who is now retired, was working for the University of Michigan Housing Bureau for Seniors. And she worked primarily with older adult clients. And she found herself going into people's homes and found that she was running into a number of older adults who were hoarding or collecting too much stuff. And for a while, she thought she was handling these problems all by herself. Then she came to find out that there were other professional people from nonprofits, from perhaps city government, from other social work agencies who were also working with these individuals, but they were all working sort of by themselves in silos, right? They were working by themselves in silos, and they didn't know that each other were all working on the same problems. So she brought them together in their first meeting, and they invited everyone who was involved with the particular individual, the client they were working with. She brought everyone together at a table, and they had a meeting, and they talked about how they could help these individuals. And out of that was the really simple beginnings of the Hoarding Task Force. Absolutely. And it's still pretty much running 12 years later the way it did then, only the people who have come to the table to work with the Hoarding Task Force and to volunteer with it we've added people over the years and changed the membership a bit. Mm-hmm. Now you will find that the members are made up of people from city government, people from code enforcement, people that are building inspectors. When I mean city government, I mean the fire department, police department, all sorts of nonprofit agencies that are located in Washtenaw County that have staff who work with individuals who may have issues with hoarding. And we come together once a month and we discuss various cases, and we talk about best practices, which is one of our primary goals. We have three main goals that we live by, and the first thing is to keep individuals housed and safe. That's of the utmost importance to us, is that individuals stay in a home with a roof over their head and that they are physically safe. Our second goal is to educate the community about what we do. And we do it in methods such as being here tonight on Access Ann Arbor. We give presentations in the community. We do trainings. We go where we're invited to talk about hoarding and people who have too much clutter. And the third thing we have been very careful to do is to develop best practices for how to work with individuals who have hoarding disorder. It's probably all of you have seen, many of you have seen hoarding television shows, and there's a lot of good work that goes on in those shows, but we do not work in the same manner. We would like to educate people in Washtenaw County about how we feel is the appropriate manner to work with people who have too much clutter and too many things in their home. So that's a little background about how we came to be. So this is a 12-year-old group of people, and some people have been there since the very beginning. Yes. Patrice, you've been there pretty much since the beginning of this project, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
And Bridget, when did you become a volunteer with the Hoarding Task Force?
About 2 years ago now.
Okay.
Yep.
So you both have some real experience under your belts with this situation.
Yes.
And now that we have a little background, by the way, did I miss anything that you thought was important to say as an introduction?
The only thing that I think I would add is the individual that worked for the Housing Bureau for Seniors, she worked in the eviction prevention program. So the reason she was getting a lot of these calls and going on these home visits with people with hoarding was because, you know, they were in jeopardy of actually losing their housing.
Right. Well, thank you for adding
Yeah.
that. So maybe we can talk to Patrice. Again, this is Patrice Legrand, who is the coordinator of the volunteer program, which is called Clutter Assistance Program, or CAP.
CAP. Yep.
So, Patrice, perhaps you could let us know, talk to the audience a little bit about why do individuals who have been hoarding or holding on to too much clutter, why do they decide, do you think, to do a cleanup?
Well, typically the clients that we work with, they call us or they get in touch with us because they have to. Most of them are in jeopardy of losing their housing, or they are living in a home where there's some structural damage and it's no longer safe for them to live there. We are seeing clients that may have a lot of pets, where they're hoarding pets, and so they don't do it voluntarily. Most of the time they do it because they want to keep their housing. So we typically get calls from landlords, home care agencies, emergency, what did it call? Firemen, police.
First responders.
Thank you, first responders. It just flew out of my head there. First responders. Sometimes we get contacted by housing inspectors that have gone and they see a house or they get a report and they go and there's some hoarding issues. So we really work well with the community to try to keep people housed, but also to keep them safe.
So when you receive these phone calls, what do you think is the primary age group of people that we would work with in Washtenaw County as we know it right now?
I'd say the majority of the people that we work with are older adults. That's one of the things that we found when working with people that have hoarding issues is they're very good at keeping things a secret.
Right.
So they're very good about keeping what's going on in their home private. So with older adults, you may have a home care agency going in to do PT or OT,
right.
Or they call the ambulance, and the first responders see the conditions of their home, or they just might have that neighbor that notices that things from the inside have spilled out into the outside, and so they make a few calls. So it's the majority of the time it's older adults. Their mobility has changed and they're not able to maintain it the way that they were able to do it in their when they were younger. We also get a lot of calls, family calls about family homes that are hoarded because you have the child protective piece.
You bring up an interesting point, children of hoarders. Do you find that sometimes the cleanup might begin because people wish to be more connected to their family members?
Yes and no. Depending on the conflict with the family. A lot of times we have found that families are estranged due to the hoarding.
Right.
And so a lot of times, when we're problem solving with the client to try to figure out what resources they have to help them, to reduce the amount of clutter in their home, and we might say, do you have family? And a lot of times it's absolutely not. They're not welcome in my home. And so especially if these children or these family members grew up in these homes with the hoarding situation, they don't really want to come back, or they don't want to deal with that parent that is hoarding. So, I would say 9 times out of 10 that most of the time when it comes to the children, you know what? I got off track.
I think it depends on the person too.
Yeah.
I was thinking
I've had clients that don't even have family to help them, and that's why the problem is so out of hand.
Yes, so have I.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I was thinking when you were talking that sometimes someone who's a grandparent might say, you know, my daughter and son-in-law or my daughter and son won't allow my grandchildren to come
Come
over
in, yes.
because of all the items in my house. And that might be something that prompts them to actually begin a bit of a cleanup process, or at least talk about it.
Talking about
Because
it,
they
yeah.
would like to be able to have that happen again. They'd like to be able to invite someone in their home.
Yeah.
And you know, something else struck me that you said. You mentioned that sometimes a neighbor might call because goods have made their way into the yard. But so many times, I think it's important for us to let our audience know that so many times there's no way that anybody even knows that someone is hoarding. We've come to learn in our years of work with the Hoarding Task Force that hoarding crosses very many boundaries.
Yeah, it does not discriminate.
That's right. It does not discriminate. It doesn't know anything about wealth.
Right.
It doesn't know anything about gender. It doesn't know nationality or culture, or if people are living in a low-income housing or they have high income.
Yes.
It knows that there's something within the person that has triggered this to begin, correct?
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting thing that people don't realize.
That's true. You could be walking down the street or working next to someone
Exactly.
that crawls into their back window at night when they get home, and you know they live in a hoarded situation. Absolutely.
And you have no way of knowing that.
No way of knowing.
You have no way of
Yeah,
knowing that.
That's true.
So once somebody has decided that they would like to clean up, that they'd like to at least talk about it and see what does this involve, they might call our phone number
Yes.
and leave a message that they'd like to talk with somebody. And I've taken many of those calls myself and talked with people. But how can you explain to the audience how the Hoarding Task Force actually can assist hoarders in their homes once they've made that all-important first step?
Well, I think the key thing that you said is once they make the call. You know, a lot of times on our task force line, we get family members, health professionals, and other people that are making the calls for the individual.
Correct.
And so one of the first things that we tell people is that the client has to want us to come to their home.
Right.
And so once they've agreed to meet with us, we will go out, and a lot of times because of past situations, they really don't want us in their home. So we try to go in there with a non-judgmental attitude, and we go in and just have a conversation. And while we're in the home, we're looking for structural damage. We're looking for health and safety hazards. We're looking for 36-inch pathways, because what we want to do first and foremost is to keep that person safe.
Right.
So as we're talking, and we have a conversation, we're not trying to judge their situation or to force them to do anything, but we do try to have a conversation with them and tell them about the points of health and safety. If they agree, we will do an assessment. If they agree, we'll take some pictures, because what we really try to do is to make sure that they know that we're going to follow their lead. Unless there's some health and safety issues, we have to address those first. For a lot of reasons. One, we want to keep them safe, but if we have paid staff or volunteers come in, we want to make sure that they're safe as well in that structure. So we would set up and do the assessment, and once we do the assessment and really determine what level of the hoard their home is in, what we'll try to do is sit down with them and talk about resources. You know, what's available. Do they have money to pay for someone to come in and help them?
What do they
clean?
want to contribute?
Right. What they want to contribute. You know, what can they contribute actually? And what we try to do is find resources in the community to help and support them if they decide that they want to work. If they want to work with us and to reduce the amount of stuff in their home. And then what we try to do is we try to get it safe as possible.
Okay. So at that point, you mentioned the word volunteer, and we're going to talk with Bridget in a moment, but maybe you could explain just briefly what is the CAP, or the Clutter Assistance Program?
The Clutter Assistance Program originated with a hoarding member that was actually an intern with one of the members of the task force. And what we realized was that a lot of the members of the task force supported or sponsored student volunteers, especially from like the schools of social work, the local schools of social work. And so what we realized was it was a very unique opportunity for an intern to be able to work with someone with their hoarding. And we realized that we could open it up to other people in the community, and there might be students or community members that were interested and willing to work with people with hoarding behavior. So we set up a program, and we give them a 2-hour training to help them to learn how to work with people and how to support them and give them the tools that they need to help them to continue to work to reduce the amount of stuff in their home once they get over a crisis.
Okay, so let's bring Bridget Spencer, our volunteer, into
That's
the
where I
conversation.
come in.
And Bridget, why don't you, she mentioned the training, why don't you give us just a few words about what did you learn in the training that you went to?
Sure. Well, I'd say first and foremost, I learned that it's not the same as the TV show Hoarding. You had to be so patient, and you really just have to go in with a non-judgmental attitude.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you learn the tools for how you can encourage these individuals to make decisions. You also learn like what different extents of hoarding there actually is, because one person's definition of hoarding is different than others, and I've been in drastically different homes. People hoard all sorts of different things, be it food or paper goods or whatever, books, clothing. So you learn about those different scenarios, how you would approach them, how you can encourage them to make healthy decisions, and then what you can then do with those objects to get them out of their house.
So after you had your training with Patrice and your fellow volunteers, did you feel that you were relatively prepared to go into a home that had already been pre-assessed by a member of the Hoarding Task Force, and did you feel comfortable in going into the home and meeting the individual that you were going to be assigned to?
I think I was more concerned about them being uncomfortable with me being there. I
really?
can imagine having a home like that where you're hoarding things and you have been for years and you haven't let people in, including family. What are they going to think when a stranger comes and says, "Show me your home, let me help you," But they're so grateful for my involvement, and they really, there's been a couple hesitant times where we're like, okay, we're going to ease you into this, but once you gain that trusting relationship, you start making decisions.
Well, along that same line, give us an example, for instance, of a recent visit. What do you do during the typical visit to the client that you're currently working with?
Well, it's a slow process, honestly, and I went into it, watching the TV show Hoarders, where I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to clean out this whole house in one weekend. But it's not like that. You just sit down, you take it slow, you don't want to overwhelm them, you want them to be able to make the decision for themselves. So honestly, I'll just stand there or sit there, and we will choose a problem area. Maybe it's a pathway that isn't the, 36 inches wide, or a stack of paper that is too close to the ceiling that's like a fire hazard. So we'll choose a problem area, and then we'll sit down, we'll grab a stack of papers or books or whatever it is, we'll go through one by one, and that individual makes the decision whether or not they keep it, and I'm just there to encourage them. And if they part with it, fantastic. I take it and I remove it from their home.
Well, we don't want to scare anybody in our audience who might be interested. So what you're doing in someone's home is not going in and cleaning up their whole house. You're
Absolutely
not going in and moving big things or
It's
throwing
one
everything
small
away.
decision at a time. Even if they just decide to discard or recycle one piece of paper that day, I'm happy, because it's one step towards solving their problem.
So looking through a box might be a 2 or 3 visit event.
Oh, absolutely. You could have a shoebox full of receipts, and maybe it takes 3 weeks to go through the whole box, and they discard half of it.
And one of the things that you might want to mention too is that you're there to support them.
Exactly.
You're really
yes.
there to support them and encourage them, and to take out or remove whatever they've decided to get rid of. And I think that that's one of the things that we really want people to know that are thinking about it, is that you're not doing cleaning, you're sitting there with them and supporting them and encouraging them, which is something that they haven't had ever, because they're used to being isolated or afraid to let people come into their homes. So for you to come in every week and talk to them while they're going through this, it's also giving them a social aspect.
Exactly.
Right.
And
But
you
it
know,
also, we want them to feel more and more comfortable, correct?
Right.
So they're less and less embarrassed, as you mentioned, and more comfortable with the fact that you're there to help, and they don't
Yep.
have to be embarrassed with you,
Right.
correct?
Yep,
Once they get
absolutely.
to know you a little. So you mentioned that you might go through a box of papers or receipts. So what do you do with those things when you've sorted through them, if they're going to part with them?
Sure. A lot of people are hesitant about recycling papers like old bills or something like that, anything with their name or identity on it. So I'll take things to shred. I will shred them for them. Some people tend to hoard food, look at perishables, and I will agree to compost them for them, if that makes, there's a mindset of I don't want to waste these things, so that's really helpful.
Exactly, right.
And then if it's garbage, if it's obviously trash, I'll take it to an outside dumpster or somewhere away from their home where they aren't going to be able to then, no, I actually wanted that, so I'll
Oh,
actually
that's the
physically
goal, is
remove it
that
from their home.
they can't go back and
Right.
pull it back again and perhaps use it,
Yep.
or put it back in the home.
Yep.
So let me ask, did you ever have a home that you were in where you went to work with somebody that perhaps was fairly new to you and they sort of disinvited you once you got there? I've had that experience myself, as
Really?
I'm sure Patrice
That's
has had, but you have
actually
not.
never happened to me. I mean, I haven't had that many clients in the last 2 years because I have stuck with people long term. I mean, it's a long term project, as you know. Like, you have to keep chipping it away at it. And once I've established trust with these people, I'm not going to leave them.
And it's really cool that they do trust you and they stay with you because, like Diane said, we have been, we can hear them walking around, but they've decided that they don't want to work with us anymore. And that's something that, we accept. And it's okay because that's their space.
Yeah, I have had clients lose motivation.
Yes.
And that's something that I really have to work on with them, where, I mean, I'm there to encourage them and let them know, like, I'm not going to give up on you. This is a mountain that we can tackle together,
Right.
So I think that's part of it. It's just being there and knowing, making sure they know that you're there.
Right.
So just keeping that motivation going.
And the non-judgment.
Yep.
And being non-judgmental and
Yeah.
being patient.
Yeah.
So, Patrice, would you say that probably any adult in any age group could be a volunteer? I was talking with one of my neighbors actually last week, and she said, "Well, I'm too old for this.
no.
I'm too old. I can't move all that stuff around." And I said, "But that's not what our goal is for you
Right.
to move things around. If we need to move something heavy in someone's home, we'll arrange to have
Yes.
someone come and do that." So the most abiding qualities that you would like someone to have is the ability to have patience
Absolutely.
and be, I heard you say, non-judgmental a number of times, and just be willing to go in and be open and caring and a bit nurturing
Yes.
with the person you're working with. Are those the primary qualities that you think?
Absolutely.
And I'm lucky because I am young and fit and I can move things if I have to, but it's rare that I have had to deal with that. I mean, these homes you've already gone into the homes, they've been assessed, so really it's small things. I mean, half the time I'm sitting down with them at a table and we're trying to make a space at the table. Anyone can do it.
I think it would be good to just remind anybody who's watching our show today is that our volunteers are not sent out into someone's home until it's been assessed
Right.
carefully by an experienced member of the Hoarding Task Force. The entire house has been assessed, and a game plan has been addressed. And we don't just willy-nilly go inside and just say,
Right.
"Oh, we're going to bring a volunteer out Tuesday and get
Right,
started."
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
well organized, and the volunteer is introduced to the individuals who live in the home.
By one of the
and
members of
by
the
one of the
task
members of the
force,
task
yes.
force, right. And then, so there's opportunity for some trust
Right.
and a relationship to develop.
And the other thing too is that the volunteer is not out there alone. They have the support of a task force member
Exactly.
that they can call at any point. And if they want to just talk about their visit, or if they're running into some type of barrier, to really talk and problem solve with the Hoarding Task Force member about, what can I do? Do you have some strategies? What works? Different things like that. So I do have some pictures
Okay.
that I wanted to show to really kind of give the audience an idea of, what type of situation that they'll be walking into, and even to show them, the progress as they work with someone.
Okay.
So before we're done, hopefully I can show those pictures and talk about them a little bit briefly.
Yes, and so the pictures will go from left to right, correct?
Yes,
From starting
at the
with
top, from left to right. So that would be the beginning of a visit after they've been assessed and vetted, and it progresses over time. And one of the things that we've really found that's been very helpful with our clients is that sometimes when they do get discouraged, like you were talking about, Bridget, if we can show them like a time lapse of their progress, it may be slight, but it's just enough where they can actually see and get more encouraged about the progress that they've been
It's
making.
very supportive.
It really is.
It's
And
very
it's
supportive
rewarding.
to see photos.
It's rewarding for me too.
Right.
Absolutely.
100%.
It's very rewarding to
Right.
see photos.
Yep.
We just have a few minutes left, and is there anything else you'd like to add? Like, if one of our viewers says tonight, I think I'd like to learn more about this.
Okay.
Do you have trainings every week, every month? How often does the Clutter Assistance Program train?
The CAP program has monthly trainings. It's the third Thursday of every month. And we have the information on our website, and it will be displayed at the end of the show. But you can go to the website, you can get all of the information about the CAP program and download the information, the application process. There's an email address that you can use where you can contact me if you have any questions about some of the things that we talked about tonight. And we also have a Facebook page.
All right.
And, it's one of those situations where you're really changing someone's life and supporting them. And it's a very rewarding experience.
Well, let's
Close with Bridget.
Let's go back to Bridget and first of all, how did you decide quickly to get in to start volunteering with the Hoarding Task Force?
So
What drew you?
2 years ago, one of my closest friends, she was actually an intern for the Hoarding Task Force, and she approached me one day knowing that I'm one of those strange people that really likes cleaning and organizing. I'm very satisfied by doing that. She was like, hey, we need volunteers for this. We always need volunteers. So I was like, yeah, that sounds really interesting, and the opportunity to help somebody in my community was a no-brainer.
All right. So what would you say to someone in the audience who's thinking, I should think about this? Would you tell them that this is an experience that they should give consideration to?
I've been doing it for 2 years. And I don't plan on stopping. It's really rewarding. You meet some amazing people. You're given tons of resources and knowledge that I didn't have before. I thought I knew a little bit about organizing and hoarding. I have friends and family that actually have hoarding tendencies. I think you'd be surprised how many people actually do. I talk to people about my experience doing this, and lo and behold, they're like, I know somebody who has those same behaviors. It's more common than you think. So
Hoarding is very common. We know that there are at least close to 4 million people in the United States that hoard, and that's people who have reported. So
Right.
all the people who've never reported anything,
Right.
it's a very large number, and people just aren't aware. So you would recommend it to anybody?
absolutely, regardless of if you're older and you can't be lifting heavy things or whatever.
Don't worry about that.
Just go sit with someone and just encourage them and cheerlead them and help them make those decisions. It makes a world of difference in their life.
And we should move towards wrapping up by saying it's very important that we have volunteers.
Absolutely.
Because the members of the Hoarding Task Force cannot do all this work by themselves. And a lot of the members of the Hoarding Task Force, as I was saying, have other jobs. They're in city government, they work for social service agencies, and they cannot go and sit there for an hour or two with somebody as much as they might like to. And so it's important that we have these volunteers who have the time and can do that. So I hope that we saw our photos, and we'd like to close our show by letting you know that our phone number, our email address, our Facebook page, and our website will all be shown at the end of our conversation today. And I'd like to thank both of you for coming and being with us today and for talking
you.
about this very important work and very valuable work. And thank you very much for being here with us.
Thanks.
Thank you. And please,
Volunteer.
volunteer.
We need you.
It's only half an hour every other week.
Yep.
Thank you very much. We need you.